Welcome back, fancy folks, to the Fanciest Man of Cornwood's YouTube channel. Tonight we're going to do something a little different. We're going to do a tier list for the Foundation's commanders. I've had a little bit of time to kind of tinker with some decks and toy with some ideas. I think we're ready to sit down and give these commanders some power rankings here. The tiers go from S to A to B to C to F. For the most part, S is a commander that is completely game warping, game changing. It's going to have to kind of force the board to deal with it or just immediately start getting tons and tons of value. An A tier commander is a commander that's very good. It has a very solid effect on it. It will change a game when it comes down, but it's not quite as game warping as an S tier. A B tier commander is kind of your average commander. It does have an effect that you can reuse, that you can get value from, but it's not one that's necessarily going to come down and warp the table or anything like that. A C tier commander is one that can be in your command zone and provide a little bit of value. However, that value is probably either difficult to kind of get the most from, or it's difficult to set up, and that's what makes those C tier commanders. But there's still ones that are unique and interesting and something you can at least try and build a deck around. An F tier commander is basically a legendary creature that is just useless in the command zone. We don't see a lot of these days because Wizards, I think, has kind of wised up to giving all their legendary creatures at least some kind of value they can provide as a commander, even in their standard sets or their core sets like Foundations. But every once in a while, I think we're still going to see a commander that's an F. And yeah, I don't know about Foundations. We'll have to kind of go through them and make that determination as we go. But I do plan on doing all of these in one sitting, so because we did the spoiler videos this time around, I won't be reading out what each commander does. If you want to get a little bit more detail on all of these, you're welcome to go back and watch that video series. I actually broke it down by a few separate colors at a time, and there's a couple of those. But we are going to go ahead and dive right in with Alicia, who laughs at fate. I like this version of Alicia. I do think that, and I think I said this in the spoiler video as well, that this is kind of a step below the last Alicia. Not that she's bad, but because this triggers on the instep, because it kind of takes a little bit longer to set up, you've got to get her down, wait your kind of entire next turn, and then get to the instep and get some value from her. That does make it easier to remove this version during that turn and during that combat step before she could actually kind of provide that value to her. However, I do like that even though she gets an attack bonus, she doesn't have to attack. You can kind of build around that third ability and not actually put her in danger attacking or something like that. And there's other ways to increase her power. So I still think that Alicia is an A tier commander. This is definitely something that could be fun to build around. There's plenty of good kind of smaller creatures in Rakdos colors. There's some smaller artifact creatures that could be parts of combos or something like that, and provide you some good value. Now it is also an A tier because that's only going to trigger once each turn cycle, and that always kind of makes a commander ceiling a little bit lower. But it's not a bad thing to trigger once a turn, and again, it could be fun to build in those Rakdos colors. All right, next we'll look at Anep, Vizier of Hazoret. This one I'm not as excited about. I do like the idea of Anep in the 99 of one of these exiled decks, where you're really just trying to cast as many spells from exile as you can. Obviously he provides some value there. He is a good attacker as far as getting some damage in at 4/2 with Trample. However, in Commander, that toughness is rough. You really don't want kind of an aggressive commander that's going to need to attack to be that weak to blockers, because people do tend to have chump blockers around. They do tend to have tokens around, and they just need 2 1/1 tokens to go ahead and kill your commander. Now, it is an attack trigger, so it's going to happen before that combat damage. It's theoretically you could build around kind of him coming back from the command zone over and over, or ways to maybe get him back. But I think in Mono Red that's going to be more difficult. Maybe if it was in Rakdos, you'd have some more ways to get him back at the end of a turn or something like that. I'm going to put it in C. I think Anep has something that's decent to build around, just like we talked about at the beginning, but I'm not excited about building around him as a commander. Now in the 99, go for it. Put him in one of those Prosper decks, one of those decks that has access to more recursion, and let's see what he can do. Right, next we've got Ophelia, Viper Whisperer. Now, this commander, on the other hand, I think the colors are perfect. And I didn't talk about that, but having access to kind of more colors that are good with the theme that your commander's bringing to the table, that's also something that, at least for me, bumps a commander up these rankings and makes it a little bit more exciting to play. I love that Ophelia is a 2-drop, a Death Touch 2-drop at that, with pretty good toughness. That's going to be really useful for those early turns to get through blockers and things like that. Again, she has an attack trigger. I think obviously we're looking more at that second ability or third ability, and being able to get through maybe some unblockable snakes or something like that. Blue and green both have plenty of combat tricks, plenty of ways to kind of help creatures survive combat. So once you get your snakes down, especially, then you can maybe start doing some trickery to get them through for damage. But yeah, I like Ophelia. I think she's a really interesting build around. I would not put her in S tier, but I think that third ability is powerful enough to bump her up to A tier, because really, if you connect with just a couple of times with that third ability and a player's at a high life total, then that's going to be a very, very big way to get someone's life total down quickly. The other thing I like to do or that I'd like to do with Ophelia, is try to get a first strike and double strike theme going, because if I'm reading that last ability correctly, then the separate damage phases of first strike and regular damage, together with all the trample that you can get in green, giving your creatures trample, I believe that's going to let you hit someone twice and do that ability twice. So if you've got someone at 40 life, theoretically you can maybe knock them down to 10 life in one combat round, which would be fantastic, and green certainly has some tools to make that happen. Black as well. All right, next we'll look at Arabho, the First Fang. This is not one I'm super excited about, only because I think there's just much better cat commanders out there, especially the original Arabho. I think this is probably more designed for the draft space or the limited space, something like that. I do think it's a solid ability, because it's not limited to once a turn or anything like that. I think that alone kind of bumps it into B tier. And there are a lot of cats in white, so if this was going to be monocolored, obviously white is, I think, the best color for it. I think there's ways that you can make this kind of surprisingly good. Just having that anthem and a way to make tokens on your commander, that's a solid combination, but I don't think it's enough to bump Arabho up to A, and I think getting any higher would be tougher when there's just better alternatives out there for that cat tribal commander. All right, let's look at Bralios of Ferris Band. This one is interesting. I like these creatures that scale to the number of lands you have in green. Obviously they can get just huge and out of hand quickly as far as their raw power. What I don't like is that so many of these creatures just don't have evasion or a way to really utilize that high power. And Bralios, unfortunately, is in that same camp. Definitely a creature that could get massive, and green does have some ways to sack your creatures to draw cards and things like that once they get really big, but I just don't think this second ability is bringing enough to the table to kind of offset that loss of evasion, loss of ways to get through for damage easily. So to me, this is a C commander. I wouldn't argue too much with someone if they wanted to bump Bralios up to B. Green does have ways to give trample and things like that, like we talked about with Ophelia. But I think not having that stapled on and your commander being a 5-drop, even if you're ramping, that's going to take a couple of turns to set up. So yeah, for me, Bralios is in C. He is probably on the higher side of C just across all the sets, not just this set, but that's where I would start him out for now. All right, next we've got Brygon, Soldier of Meletis. This is a commander I put in one of my polls to see if people wanted to see a deck build for it. I really think Brygon has some pretty good combo potential, because there's lots of ways in white and through artifacts and things like that to untap your creatures, and having this limited, again, not just to once a turn, but any time that she's targeted with a spell. There's kind of some shenanigans you can get back to with cheap flashback spells in white. There's cheap rebound spells in white, where basically, for playing an instant for 2 mana, you're drawing 2 cards. It's not amazing, but it's definitely solid in white, and I think it does. The typing here does help out quite a bit. Humans and soldiers are both really great tribes to build around. Um, Both already have a lot of +1/+1 counter support kind of baked into the tribal decks that are out there. So yeah, I think Brygon has good potential. I like Brygon more than Arapo if you're just going mono white, but I don't know that there's enough going on there to kind of warrant that bump up to A. But that is a commander that I think I'm gonna just, even if it's just for me, I'm gonna build something online and see how it works because I think there's potential there. All right, next we've got Cleon Merry Champion. Cleon is interesting because that heroic ability on a double strike creature is obviously great for combat tricks. If you happen to get her through unblocked and then you can start pumping her with combat tricks, that's fantastic. Now again, she's kind of suffering from what Anep suffers, that there's just really better versions of a commander that wants you to cast a bunch of combat tricks or something like that. There's much better options for the whole sub theme of exiling your library than casting it. So I think that, again, we're looking at a C tier commander here. I would put her above Anep because that double strike gives her much better kind of survivability if you're looking to attack. And I like that you don't have to attack to get the benefit here. It's not limited to once a turn or anything like that. But again, that sub-theme has gotten a lot of love over the last probably couple of years in different sets, and I just think there's better options out there than Cleon. All right, we've got Sinet Jelly Drover next. This is one of these Foundations commanders where they're kind of highlighting this creature type that we either didn't have a set commander for, or we just don't have a lot of options for in general. Again, you probably want to be blinking Sinet, and there's just a lot better options out there for a blink commander. There's actually one in one of these sets, and you're not getting a ton of value here when you blink. You're just getting that other 1/1. You could look at just a flying theme instead of going with jellyfish, but I don't know that that's something you want to spend 4 mana for, to just give your creatures with flying +1/+1. Again, there's just better options out there. I see why Sinet is not Azorius, but I think not being Azorius and having that white in the color identity, as a potential blink commander and as a flying buffer, just really holds back Sinet. So it's a fun card, but to me she's potentially one of the worst so far. Although, sorry, Anep and Cleon, you're bringing up the rear. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Dionysus, Elvish Archdruid. So again, this is one that just isn't as good as it could be because of context, because we know there's so many good elf commanders out there. There's a ton of them. A lot of these cards from Foundations I think are going to actually make more of a splash in the 99, and be better than we think in the 99, but I don't think that Dionysus is kind of the engine you want to build around for your elves. Now, that being said, she is going to be really, really good as a commander. It's not that this is a bad commander or one that's not going to be powerful. In fact, I think it's getting underrated a little bit, kind of the power that you get, because you're going to be pretty much just doubling up on all of your mono dorks. And obviously, even in mono green without the black color side of elves, there's tons and tons of mono dorks that you can just throw in this deck and build around. So if you have a +1/+1 counter sub-theme, then that can get kind of nutty, because even doing this just once per turn for each mono dork, each elf you have, is going to be pretty crazy. So yeah, I think there's actually quite a bit of power here, and I'd even put Dionysus above these other two A commanders that we've looked at. So hopefully someone will come out and just build a really cool shell around this. I do think there's lots of potential here, but there's also a lot of possibility that it just gets overshadowed by all the other really great elf commanders that are already out there. All right, next let's look at Elinda, Saint of Dusk. Elinda is another interesting commander from this set, because I think at first glance you kind of look at a creature that can become a 10/10 with lifelink, and you just immediately think of Voltron strategies, which is kind of a throwback. You don't see a lot of Voltron anymore because it's so easy to build in removal and interaction into decks now. It's rough to put all of your eggs in that basket with your commander. What I would look at though with the Linda is just a life gain kind of combo strategy. Black does have some ways to use big creatures and then sacrifice them for different effects, where you get an effect equal to their power or something like that. And I think to me that's way more interesting for a Linda. The only issue with that is that keeping your life total at 50, it's definitely not impossible in these colors, and some would say it's probably pretty easy, but I think in a lot of games it's going to be frustrating because you'll be more likely to get it hovering around 45 or, just getting back to 40, things like that. So now I might be underselling that because this is the perfect combination to gain as much life as you can really quickly. So that might help Alinda, but again, we have this commander like Brawlios that can just get massive, but there's no evasion here. There's no reason to think that you're not going to be chump blocked unless you build in a bunch of ways to give her evasion. So I do want to put her in a spot in high B because I think there's pretty good combo potential here, and I think that those colors are just awesome for life gain. Certainly she wouldn't be the worst commander to just kind of be sitting in the command zone as an option once you've gained a lot of life, and have a 4-drop 10/10 with lifelink and hexproof from instance. That's pretty good. And that deck doesn't really need a commander to do as much as it used to. There's so many different pieces now for kind of life gain, or even aristocrats combined with life gain in white and black. So yeah, a good commander, but maybe not one I'm as excited about as I should be. All right, next we have Evereth, Viceroy of Plunder. Now, I think Evereth has tons and tons of potential. I think people tend to agree with me that I've seen talk about the card. Only because you don't have to activate this second ability once per turn, and obviously Rakdos has already a really good aristocrat style shell where you're just sacrificing creatures as much as you can. Um, you know, Getting her really, really big, again, that's not going to be too difficult. And I love the fact that her third ability, it does cost 2 mana, but you're dealing that damage to each opponent, black and red both. Just like we looked at in our last deck tech, there's tons of group slug in Rakdos to kind of get your opponent's life total as low as possible really quickly. And if you can find a way to combine that with the aristocrat sub-theme or something like that, then I think you've got a commander that's going to be pretty powerful pretty quickly and can really dish out a lot of punishment. It's only a 3-drop, so it's pretty realistic to me to try and get that effect twice in the same game, and that also seems very, very good. All right, next we're going to look at one that I'll probably overrate because it's just a pet card, and I really love that it has the 4 different creature types that it's interacting with. And I've already done a deck tech for this on the channel. If you want to go check that out on my channel's page, you can find that under the Fancy Ticklers. There's going to be a couple of Foundations commanders already that we've looked at. But Fumulus the Infestation, I think, just like I said in that video, that this is actually a really sneakily good option for any sort of sacrifice theme in black. There's so many of these Marauders, like Fleshbag, Accursed Marauder, that just come down and will immediately make you at least 1 insect, but usually I think are going to make you 2 or 3. And black just loves having kind of incidental creature tokens around to sacrifice and get value from, and this is going to be a great engine to do that with. So again, I'm going to try and be objective. I do think it's an A-tier commander, but I'm going to put it at the end because there's not as much potential here for explosiveness as you've got with Ophelia. I think I've got Alicia maybe overrated a little bit looking at these other commanders, but I do think Fumulus is a very good commander, and if you're starting out in Commander and you're trying to build those first few decks, this is one that's not very expensive to put together, but can really kind of smack and do some good work for you at a table. So, all right, next we've got General Crete, the Bolt Bringer. This one, a lot like Dionys, this one is hurt by the fact that there are just so many good goblin options. And the fact that goblins tend to be a little top-heavy with the best commanders. You've got stuff like Krenko, multiple versions of Krenko that are going to be better than the General Crete. Now, what's interesting to me with General Crete is the second ability, because having that in the command zone for goblins is actually pretty powerful. It's one of the best tribes for just making tons and tons of little 1/1 tokens. and then doing stuff with those. So I don't think you necessarily need that first ability to do too much. I think to me this is a commander that's just a 3 mana, not quite Perforos, but 3 mana pinger every time you're making creature tokens and they're coming onto your battlefield. So for that alone, I'm going to put General Krieg toward the bottom of A tier. Again, there's so many of these commanders that are probably going to be underrated when we go back and look at this set again, only because they're coming in with tribal options and things like that that have really, really good commanders already. But don't discount General Krieg. If you're making lots of creature tokens, they don't have to be goblins, which is even better. There's some artifact themes that I think could be really interesting here if you can kind of turn maybe food, treasure, whatever kind of tokens into creatures when they come into the battlefield, then you might be looking at a lot of damage that way as well. All right, next we've got Goranog, the Red Reaper. This might be one of the coolest commanders from the set. I don't know that there's a ton of power here, but man, is it just a fun text box. It's doing a lot. Obviously 4 different abilities are, that's a lot to have on a commander. The other good thing about Goranog is that if you go back and look at the mono red warriors that are out there, there's a lot of good mono red warriors. This is a good tribe to be a part of. It's one that probably doesn't get a lot of attention, and so as they get added, people aren't maybe noticing it quite as much. But yeah, I like Goranog. I like what it's doing. I like that last ability affects all of your attacking warriors. That's actually pretty cool. There's multiple ways to make cowards now, and if you can get out an artifact or something like that, I think there might be 1 or 2 that just make every creature on the battlefield, every creature type. Then you've got something cooking, and you can make your guys unblockable and things like that. But yeah, I think Goranog is super interesting. Not as powerful as General Krieg or some of these ones that are in front of him, but very cool commander, and one that you could make a really solid deck around with those mono red warriors. All right, next is Hurska Sweet-Tooth. We're getting through these pretty quickly. This is kind of a dedicated food token commander in the Selesnya colors, which is interesting. I think if you build in a bunch of trample creatures, this could be a decently powerful commander. It's kind of a lot of work to build this deck because you've really got to get 3, well, maybe 2 things going. Building that life gain and having creatures with evasion that are able to get really big really quickly and things like that. I think that might be a little bit more of a challenge than people are anticipating, but nevertheless, Hurska is pretty cool. Just barely to me outside of A tier because that's just I think going to be an awkward combination of themes to pull off, but not hard to trigger at all, and lots of ways where you can just ignore that first ability and just make your deck all about life gain and having some creatures that can take advantage of it. And there are some of the creatures with flying that get really big. I think I don't remember the name of the one that the more +1/+1 encounters it gets as you gain life, the better it gets basically, and it can eventually be indestructible. That would be a great target for this second ability. The other thing that is kind of sneaky about it that I'll point out real quick before we move on is that you can target the same creature repeatedly, and you can do it at instant speed. So what I would try and do with Hurska is set up a way to gain life maybe 3 or 4 times during combat as cheaply as I can with maybe the small creatures that tap to do it or something like that. And then I would be trying to pump one of those flyers just maybe 3 or 4 times and take someone out sneakily that way. So, very interesting commander. Next we have Evora, Insatiable Air. This is not one I love. I understand that it can get really big because red has tons of ways to discard cards. It is making blood tokens and things like that. But I think Evora is held back quite a bit by starting out as that 1/1 body. I'd put Evora under probably Bralios because Bralios is not going to have a hard time, getting tons and tons of power. It's just that lack of evasion. Now, the fact that there's trample here already is nice because once Evora gets big enough, you won't have to worry about evasion necessarily. But you still have to chew through whatever blockers people have. You still have to discard tons and tons of cards. If you think about it, getting Evora to a 10/10 is discarding 9 cards. Even though mono red can discard cards pretty well, unless you're looking at a wheel or something like that, that's pretty tough to get up to. So not necessarily bad completely, but one that's going to take a lot of work to build around. Right, next we have Kellen, Planar Trailblazer. We saw a little bit of this in Lord of the Rings, and I think there have been some others in other sets as well, where you kind of have the progressive step commander in your command zone. I don't know that this one is necessarily one of the best ones. I think Kellen is decent, but 6 mana to get a 3/2 double striker is just not going to help out too much in most commander games. By the time you get up to that 6 mana, or you go through all those steps to get Kellen to that size, you're still going to need to pump Kellen quite a bit to have him not kind of die to chump blockers or something like that. Being groundbound is not great. You would love some type of evasion here to go with that double strike. And there's other versions of Kellen that have flying, so I was a little surprised that this is one that didn't get flying tacked on. But also, exiling cards, again, there's lots of great options in the 99 here, but as commanders, these mono red creatures that we've looked at are just probably not what you want to go with in the command zone for that theme. I think because of all that put together, I'm going to put Kellen here. I actually like Double Strike already being on Cleon a little bit better. You don't have to sink more mana in to set that up. So that's what I'm going to do with Kellen for now. Next we've got Kiora, the Rising Tide. This is another, if you go to the Fancy Ticklers playlist here on the channel, you'll find a deck tech here for Kiora. I really like Kiora. I think people kind of looked at that second ability, saw that it was making a legendary token, and maybe didn't dismiss it, but I know there was at least one other person on YouTube that I really liked their content, but they kind of made it out like it was difficult to use that and use it effectively. I think in mono blue it's really not that hard. If nothing else, you could put an Altered Dimension in your deck and just find different ways to be sacking that token. But what we did is go in a little bit different direction. I won't spoil that deck tech, but you're welcome to go check that out. And I think that direction is powerful enough to warrant Kiora being in the B tier. I don't know that it's A tier because there are some hoops to jump through, but you're making a very big token every time Kiora attacks. And getting to that 7 more cards in your graveyard is probably easier to do in blue than almost any other mono color. Green has a lot of self-mill, there's self-mill in other colors, but Kiora has tons of spells that just let her draw and discard and just loot all day. And you really only need to do it 5 times because obviously getting Kiora to the battlefield is going to let you do that twice. So yeah, to me that is a high B tier commander, really knocking on the door of A. Okay, next we have Koma, World Eater. So this is probably just kind of the splashiest commander in the set to me, and I think it's the most powerful as well. You could make an argument that this is A tier, but the fact that it comes with Word 4, it can't be countered. Trample, there's already evasion on your commander. You're in Simic colors, so getting to 7 mana is just trivial. You'll probably be able to do that by turn 3 or 4 if you've built plenty of ramp into your deck. There's just nothing about Koma that's bad. I understand why, there's not maybe as much excitement about Koma as there could be because Simic just gets these big, splashy, powerful commanders, it seems like constantly, but I think Koma's fantastic, and especially if I was kind of a newer player starting out, I would love to build a Koma deck because of that ward. You don't have to worry as much with a commander that can't be countered, that has Ward 4, it's got 12 toughness. I mean, this is one of the tougher commanders without board wipes to get off of the battlefield. So, I love Koma. I think there's tons of power here. I don't know that we need to belabor it because Simic has so much power already, but definitely an S tier commander. All right, next we'll look at Kaikar Zephyr Awakener. This is a cool take on Kaikar. I think for the most part, you're going to build this deck in a way where you want to be blinking something with that ability, but I could see a world where you also, want to make tokens and things like that. I do kind of wish this Kaikar had red in the casting cost, just so you could do a polymorph strategy. But I understand there's already kind of polymorph commanders in that color identity. So yeah, this is an interesting commander. It's a good blink option. and it's one that kind of does it a different way than some of the other ones we've seen in the past. So I'm going to put it in kind of low tier A. I think Blink is very powerful in the Azorius. We've seen that before, and this is a fun way to do that. And you can even do it just kind of in a control shell incidentally as you're casting your interaction, which to me makes Kaikar a really sneakily good choice for a player that likes to be kind of the control at the table and things like that. All right, next let's look at loot. I'm going to put Kaikar up above some of these others. I feel like it doesn't take as much work to set up Kaikar as some of those. But anyway, Loot Exuberant Explorer. Not super exciting only because Mono Green already has some great commanders for just, big stompy shells, shells to get really big creatures into play, but definitely a solid commander. I'd put Loot maybe here high in the B tier. You're not going to have any trouble getting both of these abilities to trigger or to work for you on each of your turns. Mono green, you just stick a bunch of forests in the deck and you can use that first ability effectively. And then the second ability, obviously, you're going to have lots of really good value creatures that kind of hover around that 6, 7, maybe even 8 casting cost, and be able to put those into play really quickly. So, yeah, Loot is good. Just don't think there's too much discussion needed. All right, Nazar the Velvet Fang. Now, this is one I think is very interesting. Might wind up doing a deck tech on this before we kind of cycle out of Foundations and start getting hyped about the next set, which Wizards has made sure we do that very quickly now. But I like the fact that Nazar is putting counters on itself that brings Proliferate into play as kind of a sub-theme. Black has plenty of ways to proliferate. It would have more if it was in Dimir, but I don't think it holds Nazar back too much. But then the fact that Nazar is drawing you cards, you can even build around the life loss that you're going to have after using that third ability, which is nice. To me, this is just a flavor win. The only thing I worry about, and the only thing that kind of keeps Nazar in the B tier to me, is even with Menace and that hopefully helping you get through on a player that's not running a lot of creatures, I think you're going to have a bit of a difficult time getting a 3/3 through to deal, or just to attack without dying. Maybe you build your deck around ways to bring Nazar back after that ability goes off, so you don't have to necessarily worry about it too much. And actually a sub-theme of kind of a smaller creature reanimator could be pretty cool in this deck. But yeah, overall I like the package. I like the value you're getting from that 4 mana, and gaining life in mono black is extremely easy. So, all right, let's look at Nirdiv Devious Diver. So Nirdiv blue is a little bit more challenging to get Nirdiv pumped up to a number that makes that milling, more worth it. Now, what I do like about mono blue, I hope I said mono blue, but what I do like about mono blue being paired with this is that untapping Nirdiv and then tapping and doing that over and over and over, that is easy in mono blue. It's one of the best colors for that, if not the best. So, the second ability working around your graveyard, I think that's kind of neat. I don't know that there's a ton of power here. I'd actually put it kind of toward the bottom of B tier, but this could be one of those decks that is just a fun build. It's not necessarily super, super powerful, or Nirdiv, herself is not necessarily super powerful, but definitely one that you could make happen in mono blue, and I would have a fun time trying to kind of put that together and find ways to get her power up really high in mono blue. All right, Ozox the Clattering King. This is one I'm kind of fascinated with, not necessarily because it's powerful. I'm just going to spoiler alert and throw it into C tier right away. I don't think Ozox is super powerful, but I love the idea of trying to build a combo engine where you're just sacrificing Ozox and then its token over and over and over again. One thing, if you can reduce the casting cost of your creatures by 1 or 2, then basically, with enough sacrifice outlets out, which black is more than capable of producing, I think you could have a loop set up where for every black mana you have, you're just cycling Ozox over and over and over. So that is kind of neat to me. I think it would be fun to try and build the commander, but as far as power, even setting up some kind of aristocrat strategy where you're pinging your opponents each time you do that or something like that, it's a lot to set up for a combo that maybe just doesn't bring that much power to the table. There's other easier ways in black to get value from those creatures dying, but it is really fun, and the fact it has a token named Jumbled Bones is also kind of fun because it's just a ridiculous name. All right, next let's look at Plagon, Lord of the Beach. Might be Plagon, who knows? Starfish is really a cool creature type. I don't think we've seen that a lot. But this is one where, again, there are better options out there for what it's doing. And the reason I say that is because that second ability is fun, but having to trigger that each time for each of your creatures that you're trying to do this with is probably a little difficult. Now, the reason that it's going into high C instead of kind of mid or lower C to me is that for 3 mana to draw a card for each of those creatures, that's pretty good. There's definitely, you can build ways into your 99 to have basically every creature you play be one with greater toughness than power. And so if you can draw 4 or 5 cards for 3 mana, then to me that bumps this commander up a decent bit. And there are backup ways you can put in your 99 to be dealing combat damage with toughness rather than power. So, anytime you have a commander that's coming down and doing something, obviously you're going to look at Blink, and kind of like Kaikar, this has a better color identity to do that than a commander like Sinet or something like that, or even Kiora, where it's coming in and doing something. Actually, I've talked myself into it. I'm going to put this a little bit higher. I think it's probably a little better than Nirdiv, just because of all the card draw that you're looking at. All right, next we've got Pol Jamar, Illusionist. Hopefully that's how that's pronounced. Great creature types here. Human and Wizard. I mean, you don't really need the Illusion creature type, but Human Wizard alone is a very good creature type. That second ability is going to look at all the creatures you control, so obviously building this in a way where one of your commander's creature types are working with it is just going to make it that much better. Again, we're looking at probably a Blink commander here, so you can draw cards repeatedly and things like that. But yeah, Humans and Wizards both. Wizards more so in mono blue, without having white or green in that color identity, are going to be very good. And Pol Jamar, held back a little maybe by that casting cost, but definitely I think is above some of these low tier B commanders, just because it's going to draw you tons and tons of cards. And blue tends to have ways to do something with that card draw. There's lots of creatures that like it when you draw cards, and even some colorless stuff like Psychosis Crawler. All right, Samela, Malician Poet. So I think Samela, to me, is probably the most underrated commander of this set so far, at least from what I've seen just elsewhere on YouTube and Reddit, online places like that. When it came out, I think we just had this kind of fatigue over these enchantment commanders because we've seen so many enchantment commanders. But Samela is a very good version of a mono white enchantment commander, and that is mostly due to the fact that it's making an enchantment the first time you cast one. Doubling up on those is incredibly powerful. Now, I'm not going to put it in S tier, I'm not going to put it any higher in A tier because it is missing that kind of second color to help bolster its options of enchantments it has. Green especially would have been fantastic for Samela because of course you could add in even more ways to draw cards every time you cast an enchantment and things like that. But white still has lots and lots of enchantment support. There's tons of ways to make Samela give you great value, and then it's turning into a 5/5 with lifelink as soon as you just cast, I think, 3 enchantments. And probably more realistically once you cast 2, because you're going to have other ways to make more enchantments too. So yeah, I just think very underrated. 3 mana is fair for what you're doing here, and you're going to get a lot of mileage out of just doing the one thing the deck wants to do, which is just play the best enchantments you have access to in white, and that's a powerful shell. All right, next we've got Koala, Ajani's Pridemate. Now this is one that I think is going to be pretty great, only because Ajani's Pridemate is such a solid card on its own, even in Commander where not having evasion and things like that do hurt it a little bit. But the fact that you can put any type of counter on Koala and go ahead and start getting that value and start kind of buffing up that first ability, that's pretty fantastic. White has lots of good attacking creatures that they won't have to care at all about life gain. they're just going to get that bonus and either trample through or have double strike or something like that. So, paying 4 mana for this maybe is a little much, but the fact that a lot of the options you have for incidental life gain in white, a lot of the ways you're going to be triggering the second ability are very cheap and they're repeatable, means that you probably have a few of those on the board the turn that you cast Koala, or at least one, where you can start putting counters on Koala and making her bigger, or making it bigger. And then you've got lots of ways to proliferate with artifacts and things like that. Maybe not as much in white, but there are a couple in white as well. The 1/1 flyer that when it deals combat damage, you proliferate. I'm already, kind of envisioning how this deck goes together. So, yeah, good commander, one that's going to be good for a player starting out to just build life gain and creatures that like to attack. Easy breezy. All right, next we've got Red Tithe Extractor. I love the fact that this is giving Death Touch to your attacking creatures. I wish that, I guess you can stack the triggers so that Hooded Blightwing, things that care about your creatures having Death Touch when they attack, I think there are a couple of those. You can go and make those go off as well. But then the fact that you're stealing your opponent's stuff combines really well with the first ability. You're probably going to be able to get through for that combat damage, especially if you're building in maybe flying tokens. Bitter Blossom seems like just a fantastic include in this deck. The only thing to me that brings Nev down a bit is the fact that people really hate getting their cards stolen. Now, I say that because I'm not the best person and I have a tendency to get really upset when people start using my cards against me, but I've also seen that, online. I've seen it in other games where it's not just me that's getting frustrated. That is a good way to make yourself a target at a table. So I don't know that factors into the actual power level, and that's not something I factored into the power level, but it is something to know when you're playing one of these commanders like Nev, or Rev. I think I keep saying Nev, but it's Rev. If you're going to play a commander that steals stuff, you need to build things into your deck to kind of be able to withstand being the archenemy from as soon as that effect starts going in. All right, next let's look at Shrufus Sproutsire. So I think definitely the most fun commander in the set. There's other contenders, but to me, Shrufus is just really, really fun. I love the art. Now, as far as power level, this is tough because, of course, I want to put Shrufus up into B or A tier, but I don't think I can do that. He doesn't have black, which to me is actually fairly disappointing. Even white would have been a decent second color because those are the other colors that will help you get Saprolings out or care about Saprolings, that kind of thing. But if he's going to be monocolored, obviously mono green is the best color for that. Yeah, just a really fun commander, fun effect to make a ton of Saprolings. The easiest way, ironically to me, to get these Saprolings is not going to be to try and swarm someone, at least not initially. It's actually going to be to try and go a little bit Voltron-y and get Shrufus some evasion, maybe get him, or he already has trample, but get him some way to be unblockable, or to boost his power up, obviously really, really high without having to risk him dying, something like that. So, yeah, super fun. A little bit more difficult to build than I'd like because it's just so fun a commander, but one that'll still be still garner a lot of goodwill at the table just because you're playing a commander and his name is Shrufus. All right, let's look at Slinza, the Spike Stampede next. This one I think is actually maybe the best of all the ones that kind of bring a creature type that didn't have a commander or didn't have necessarily a dedicated commander that was the same creature type or something like that. Bringing that creature type to the forefront, I might make some waves, but I'm throwing Slinza up here into the lower A tier. I think this combination of abilities is fantastic for beasts. The fact that it's Gruul and it has access to all of these red ways to make your attackers especially even more dangerous is pretty fantastic. And then, it's bringing in stuff with a +1/+1 counter, so if you want to throw in some ways to proliferate, obviously that's going to help you out. You can pay to fight things. Most of your creatures will have 4 or more power that enter, so it's just such a great combination of ways to kind of pick off smaller blockers at the table and then just start attacking in and perfect abilities for a Gruul commander. So, yeah, way to go with Slinza. Looking forward to maybe putting that together and trying it out as a beatdown. All right, next we have Sutina, Speaker of the Tajaru. You know, blink is pretty tough to do in mono green. I understand you don't have to blink here. You can always use that second ability and kind of build around +1/+1 counters. However, to me, we've got another low C tier here. You know, it does ramp when it comes in for 3 mana. That's pretty good. But I think it's maybe below, you know what, it is better than some of these ones that take a lot more setup. It's just not bringing a lot of power to the table, so to me that puts it a little bit lower on the list. Plus, you know, we've been looking a lot at the tribal options, and obviously this is a 99 in an elf deck. You have much better options for your commander if you're going to run elves, including the other elf commander in the set that we've already looked at. All right, next we've got our Ninja Turtle. We've got Teiko, the Patient Avalanche. Obviously, this is a pretty fun callback if you're a 90s kid like me and you love Ninja Turtle nostalgia. So just the idea of building a Ninja Turtle deck is pretty fun. But as far as power level, you know, this does take some setup to make it work. I do think it's a little bit stronger than, you know, just a monocolored cat commander, even though, again, some of these commanders will be underrated and then kind of show over time that you can build a good shell around them. But this is a nice option for your ninja deck, especially. You know, it does have some blink potential because of that second ability, and I like that. So it definitely has some things going on. Will probably be built more as a meme than anything else initially, but hey, you know, it's not too bad. It's nice to have little cultural kind of callbacks and just fun commanders, so I like it. All right, this is, I think, the last one we're going to look at that we already have a deck tech up on the channel for, but Thurid is one of our fancy ticklers that we looked at and built a deck around. I like Thurid. I think, you know, obviously the second ability is what people are coming here for. That's what they're building around. And it does deliver because mono white is definitely the best color for that second ability. So, you know, the fact you're copying your changelings as well, that's always really fun. I think that there's some real power here to go with it. So I'm going to put this above Loot here. Not quite as easy to build as Koala. Koala has a really easy build, but yeah, Thurid is a very good commander that is going to give you solid value. So, all right, we've got Tiny Bones, Bauble Burglar next. Again, just like Rev, if you're stealing your opponent's stuff, you're going to have probably a pretty powerful deck, but you need to be ready to deal with kind of what comes after. I'm going to put Tiny Bones at the end of A because having a 2-drop that has this effect is going to let you get off and running very quickly. It's harder to keep Tiny Bones off the battlefield with that 2 mana cost. And you know, there's a lot of good kind of matches here between monocolored commander and what it's doing. But Tiny Bones might be the best one. It's just discard is so easily built into a black deck that I don't think Tiny Bones is going to pose any sort of challenge there for finding ways to build those discard effects into your deck. So just a strong commander and one that's going to give you a lot of value. All right, next we go to Erdnon, Dromoka Warrior. I have to do it, guys. It's tough, but we've got our first F. I just don't see a way, you know, blinking to put 1/1/1 counter on a creature is just not worth it. There's too many other good blink commanders. There's too many other good effects from blinking your creatures. And then, you know, when you attack, yes, you're putting or you're not putting a +1/+1 counter. Yes, you're giving a creature that has a +1/+1 counter on it an additional ability. But the fact that, you know, it's not evasive, it doesn't really help get around chump blockers or anything like that. I just think you need more in the command zone, especially from a monocolored commander. So it does have the human type, does have the warrior type. Maybe it goes into the 99 really well of a deck that's +1/+1 counter centric. You know, the fact that Erdnon doesn't have to attack himself is pretty good. That does help that second ability stick around. But overall, just really weak as a commander and not one that I'm going to bother putting a deck together for or anything like that. All right, we've got Zamon Paradox Sculptor next. This is the Simic card to me that even though it looked fun, it's just not necessarily doing anything new. It's not providing so powerful an effect that I'm going to run out and build another Simic deck. I've already got a few decks that have blue and green in the color identity, and I just like them better. So I do like Zimone's potential in the 99. I'm going to put, Daisy, let's see what we can do here. There we go. I am going to put Zimone up relatively high because obviously in Simic, you have tons of ways to build counters into your deck. There's lots of other counters that you can try to kind of mess around with and things like that. Especially with artifacts, the fact that the second ability is doubling up artifacts, I think is really neat. But I would have loved if it could have included enchantments maybe. As far as from just a fun deck building perspective, that would have let you double up counters on sagas and things like that. That would have been kind of neat. So it's powerful, for 4 mana, getting a 1/4, at least she's got some more toughness than some of the other Zimone variants. But if you're going to build Zimone, which, spoiler alert, I will be building this week as part of one of our poll winners, I just think there's better versions of Zimone that are a lot more interesting to build around. So a good commander, one that if you're getting into it, I could see, wanting to put together, but not what I'm quite looking for. All right, and now we've got our last commander. I think we're going to manage to keep this under an hour, which was my goal. But we have Zul Assured Lichlord. Yeah, zombies have way, way better options. Just like a lot of these other commanders, this one just really, really suffers from just the breadth of other options. You really want Dimir at this point for zombies. There's just too many good effects in blue or in blue and black that go with that zombie deck where I wouldn't necessarily limit myself to mono black. I like that it has ward. Ward always helps, but that ward just paying a couple of life, I don't think that would keep anyone from removing this commander. And again, there's plenty of ways with zombies already to either get them out of the graveyard or to be able to cast them from your graveyard, things like that. I do think there's decent power here. It's not like zombies are bad. It's still a very good creature type to build around. And, 2 mana, again, these cheap commanders are a little bit easier to bump up in power because keeping them on the field is just not a challenge. Black makes plenty of mana, so getting Zul Assured out 2-3 times throughout a game, not a challenge at all. But that's where I'm going to put Zul Assured, and that's my tier list, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you have anything, I know everyone agrees with every tier list, but if you do have any disagreements with where I put these commanders, I would love to hear about that. Go ahead and put it in the comments below and let me know what you think. Otherwise, if you go to the channel page, there's a couple of playlists there to enjoy some more content if you'd like. Hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel helps a ton. Helps get the algorithm kind of put in our favor a little bit so we can start building something up. But otherwise, thank you so much for stopping by. Have a great rest of your day and keep playing Commander.